Great. Thank you, Sara. And thank you to the organizers for hosting this event and giving me the opportunity to moderate this session that addresses the very important and topical issues of how foreign information, manipulation, and interference, such as disinformation, challenges gaming and poses a threat to the gaming sector. We have also been promised to receive suggestions on how government entities and the public can best respond to this growing area of influence. My name is Sara Carlstein. I work as an analyst at the Capability Development Department at the Swedish Psychological Defense Agency. I primarily work with issues regarding strengthening resilience among youth and civil society against disinformation and foreign malign information influence. This includes spreading and increasing knowledge, conducting trainings, and having strategic dialogue with both local and national NGOs. And with me on stage, I have Mr. Dominik Swiecicki. He serves as a counselor at the Swedish Embassy in Tallinn. His main area of responsibility is psychological defense. Prior to his current position, he served as a senior analyst at the counter-influence branch of the operation department at the Swedish Psychological Defense Agency, where he mainly specialized in the operational countering of influence campaigns and analyzing how the private communication, entertainment, and gaming industry can be used as tools of foreign influence, be affected by it, or be a part of building resilience against it in democratic societies. I also have Ms. Winssi, project leader for the Swedish Gaming Association, Sverok. Sverok is one of the largest youth organizations in Sweden that work with spreading different parts of the gaming culture around the country. Aya has led different projects working with extremism, racism, and toxicity on gaming and gaming adjacent platforms and the effect it has on youth and children. And last but not least, Mr. Robin L. Kady, serving as a member of the international staff at NATO headquarters, working as part of the Information Environment Assessment Team. He provides the Alliance with situational awareness of developments in the information environment, focusing in particular on hostile information activities. A warm welcome to all of you. I'm very pleased to have you in this panel and that you would want to share your expertise with us. Now we're going to hear some opening remarks from the three of you, starting with you, Dominik. You will give some perspectives on threats and vulnerabilities in the world of gaming from the viewpoint of Swedish Psychological Defense Agency. I understand that you're concerned about the low awareness about these issues. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. Then over to you, Robin. You will continue talking from NATO's perspective, giving some examples of how institutions can counter and respond to information influence activities. And thirdly, over to you, Aya, sharing your deep knowledge and long experience of working with young gamers in Sweden, promoting gaming culture and making it accessible and safe for everyone. The floor is yours, Dominik, please.
Thank you so much, Sara. Okay, this seems to be on. Okay, so for everyone who may not be familiar with the Psychological Defense Agency, I just want to start by saying that we look at foreign antagonistic information influence campaigns directed at Sweden, aiming to influence our decisions, opinions, and so on. So we don't look at a domestic debate, and we certainly don't monitor what Swedish gamers say or do to each other online. So looking at the gaming space, I mean, a good comparison is to compare with social media. I mean, social media, everyone knows about disinformation and propaganda being present in social media. And not unlike social media, gaming is also a huge digital infrastructure that can be used for telling stories, sending messages, and communicating in general. I think we have about 3.3 billion gamers in the world. You can compare that to the last figure I heard about Facebook was that they had like 2.9 billion users logging in monthly. So it is a huge space. There are, of course, differences. Gaming can be quite immersive, interactive in another way. It's a more fragmented space, and so on. But also it's a space where loyalties are formed quite quickly, and awareness of propaganda and disinformation is very low. So I wanted just to go through a few of the vulnerabilities that we have identified on gaming platforms. So first of all, game design. I mean, games can be designed in order to recruit, promote different political ideas, foster patriotic fostering, as we saw in the Kremlin leaks that games in Russia are being developed to do. They can be revising outcomes of actual wars by skewing historical facts, etc., etc. And we know that popular culture is shaping the way we see the world. Spending a lot of time in games can have the same effect or other types of effects as watching movies or reading books or listening to music. So it's something that we need to be aware of, at least. Also, games have social functions, not unlike social media in different ways. I mean, there are in-game chats or team building functions. We have seen radicalization, etc., on those types of platforms. Gaming adjacent platforms used for communication as well. We have advertising. I think that's an interesting one. After 2016, when we had the democratic Hindenburg of social media, it was advertising on social media was a bit like the Wild West. You could do dark ads. You could do all sorts of things. You could be based in St. Petersburg and do advertising in an election somewhere in a European country. Self-regulation is something that the social media companies have been doing after that, but this is something that has not yet happened in the gaming space. Political advertisement and other types of advertisement in gaming is a huge thing. We have seen presidential campaigns from Obama, for example, in basketball games or racing games or whatever. So it is a thing. Misrepresentation of game content is another. A lot of games are quite realistic, and content can be used to depict conflicts. We've seen this in the Hamas-Israel conflict, in Ukraine, etc. User data, also quite interesting. Gaming companies are quite on the front end of tech development when it comes to telling these stories and adjusting narratives based on data that is being collected on the fly, like everything from brain waves to pulse to eye tracking movement, to actually adjust the narrative in game based on data being collected, and also behavioral data and so on. We have sports washing, another one, and also I want to just mention countermeasures, and we were talking a little bit about this in the before we went on stage. Games can also, of course, be used as countermeasures against disinformation by either designing games that promote critical thinking. And one example is a totally different example is a Finnish magazine that created a room in the game Counter-Strike on a Russian server where they published information about the war in Ukraine just to circumvent the censorship. So there's a lot more we could talk about, but I think my 3 minutes are probably up. Thank you.
Maybe so. Thank you, Dominik. Yeah. Please, Robin.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. First, I wasn't sure whether to say this because I have a confession to my Vietnam colleague as well. So I participated in the poll and I think I lost every single challenge. I'm sorry, you know. You can still trust in us, but this just shows that we always have to develop our tools, our people, and that we always have to continuously train. So I'll connect with you after to continue. So I'm super excited to be here, and I had a lot of different notes prepared, but I talked to a lot of you earlier and I just recognized, okay, you know everything basically, so I think you should all be here on stage. I was very nervously watching the poll at the beginning when you were voting what is the biggest challenge, what you perceive as the biggest security threat. And then disinformation came first. So, well, okay, the pressure is on for us and for my team, because that's exactly the thing we do. We continuously try to understand hostile information and disinformation. So I think first we can all agree that hostile information, that disinformation, they're both key security risks. Maybe just like to visually represent this, hands up who agrees with that statement, that disinformation, hostile information are the key security threats. right? Maybe I should have asked who doesn't agree, and then we could have put people on the spot a bit. But basically, this is exactly what NATO thinks. We care about the information that circulates. We care about the information that reaches you on your smartphones, media environment, laptops. And because information doesn't just stay in the communication realm, it of course has political, security, military effects and consequences. What happens, for instance, if based on disinformation we stop believing in certain institutions? Or what happens if based on disinformation we stop believing in the necessity to support Ukraine? And NATO, we also care about the information that circulates because foreign states are actively leveraging this information to achieve their political goals and to influence us, to influence you. So, but what happens if that continuously develops? So we've come a long way. So first, we at NATO, we recognize that disinformation, that hostile information, that they're both threats to national security. So we've come a long way here. We recognize that they're both a matter of collective defense and of course the resilience issue. We talked a bit earlier as well. We heard how important the more resilient we are, the more protected we are as well. And of course it cannot be treated in isolation, this issue, right? It is a society issue and it actually involves a whole of society approach to counter this. So we all have to work closely together. What we do, it cannot, of course, only be solved by NATO. So we all understand, okay, we recognize the threat. So, but now the question is, what does NATO do to respond? Just want to offer a couple of thoughts and then happy to discuss. So firstly, of course, that's what the key thing that my team is doing. We, as a first priority, we have to first understand the threats. So we continuously track disinformation, hostile information activities in order to then enable more effective response options here. And we leverage the latest technology to do so. We'll reflect a bit on that later as well. So, but you can say if you just focus on monitoring, if you just focus on tracking disinformation, hostile information activity, something very important is lost. What about our own messages, right? And of course, this is a key priority for us to actually make our own voice heard amidst all the disinformation out there. So this is one key thing that we're focusing on as a way to counter disinformation. So here we always try to engage the right audiences with correct information, that they actually base their views and their opinion on correct information and not on disinformation, right? Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, of course, but we just want to make sure that the opinion is based on factual information, not on disinformation, right? So we try to engage new audiences. We work, of course, with journalists. We work with think tanks, universities. We work with content creators. We run grants. We try to engage Russian language audiences and so on. And of course, we also try to engage newer communities like the gaming community. So just 3 final points from my side, given the nature of this panel, and since I used to play the fair amount of games myself, I just wanted to offer a couple of things, lessons learned, lessons we can learn from the gaming world to apply them and what we do with these lessons at NATO. Okay, basically it's me. What have I learned from the gaming world and how does that influence my work at NATO? So growing up, I promise, 1 minute and then I'm done. Growing up, I used to play this game with a good friend of mine, Gothic. Hands up, who knows this game? Oh my God, I think I'm maybe too old already, geez. Okay, some. So it's this open world medieval fantasy game, right? So you can do quests or like me and my friend Jonas, we lost ourselves in the open world, basically. So a couple of things what I've learned from this experience, right? Number one, it's all about creative thinking, right? With games, you are dropped into new worlds, you're confronted with new problems, you have to conceptualize new worlds. And this is exactly what we do at NATO, right? The threat level isn't the same, right? It always develops, it is dynamic, it adapts. And that's why at NATO, we always develop our people, our processes, and our tools to actually remain dynamic as there are constantly new worlds to explore. Secondly, with these open world games, like the inventory, like the storage is limited, right? So you always have to decide which items to sell, which items to invest in, and so on. And of course, I know it's a bit, but this is basically what we do at NATO. Of course, our inventory is way more, we have way more storage, but we always invest in very new capabilities to actually make sure that we leverage AI, that we leverage the latest technology to protect our citizens better. So this is one thing to deal and to recognize these resources. Then last point, and I don't want to get too emotional, but it's all about the habits that you cultivate, right? Like there are endless opportunities in these open worlds, right? So it's about developing habits and growing through. Sometimes you fail a request, like you fail a quest, and then you have to return when you're stronger, when you upgrade it. And of course, you know, this is way easier and less frustrating in the gaming world, in the real world, but this is something, right? Like you try something, like you fail, then you try it again, and you fail, you learn from it, and then you do it again. Again, less frustrating in the gaming world. But this is exactly it at NATO as well. We always try to, every day we remain focused on executing, on understanding, executing the tasks that we get and understanding that complex environment. So it's like not one thing that can be done in one sprint. It has to be done as a continuous habit. I'll end here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it quite short. So now,
No stress.
but I think it's a great idea that we should cooperate more, and that is something that the civil society has been saying for a long time. So I represent Sverok. We are a Swedish youth organization who we have different clubs all around Sweden where we help children and youth organize around their hobby, which is gaming. It's not only online gaming, which we mostly will talk about here, but there are different types of games, such as board games and everything from that we think is nerdy and fun, basically. But this information is something that is spreading more and more, and something that is very important, which is one of the reasons that we are here. According to a study conducted by Swedes and the Internet, 7 out of 10 children in 2023 use gaming platform to communicate with their friends online. So more and more are using gaming spaces to be with their friends and to socialize, which is also why we see extremists using and exploiting these types of platform. Earlier this year, we also released a report called Extremism in Gaming, where we can see that about 64% of children between the ages of 12 and 20 have at some point in the game experienced right-wing extremism, which is quite a lot. And this is only in Sweden, but we can see that these are also something that this is all of. I mean, gaming is such an international space. It's quite difficult to say that this is only Sweden, but these are Swedish children's experiences. We also see that 1 out of 10 children have experienced hateful comments or discrimination about Muslims or Jews, which we also has increased now with the Israel and Palestine conflict, as well as a lot of negative content during the Ukrainian-Russian war. So we see how gaming platforms are being abused and exploited, but also why they are relevant today and why social issues are being brought up. Because so many people are I think about 80% of everyone around the world has at some point played a game, or 70%, which is quite a lot, which is also why these extremists use these platforms. Let me just see in my notes that I don't forget anything. But apart from this, it is also important that adults are being engaged and are aware what is happening online. With the study that I conducted, a lot of children said that they were afraid to speak to a parent or adult if they experienced something online, because they said that they wouldn't understand. And children that are isolating themselves are even at a larger risk of experience hateful comment and being radicalized by these actors. So I think it's very important that we are here and we can speak about these issues. And I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Shaya. And also you, Dominik and Robin. And now we will proceed with the questions from the audience, both online. I have some questions here on my iPad, but we also want to open the floor for the audience here in the room. So you can prepare some questions, and before that, I can take the opportunity to ask a question myself to all three of you, or rather it's 3 questions in one. It's about challenges of disinformation. So what are you most worried about when it comes to disinformation and information influence in the world of gaming? How have the problems changed over time? Would you say that there are any particular factors that have influenced this? Who wants to start? Yeah?
The one that holds the mic system, I guess. Well, from our perspective, I'm bringing a youth perspective here, we can see that a lot of disinformation or a lot of extremist content is being normalized in gaming. A lot of the children are experiencing this or right-wing extremism, for example, right-wing comments very often, and it said, okay, this is just something that I have to deal with and have to get past. Also, because there are so many people that are using gaming platforms and gaming adjacent platforms, there is much wider content for disinformation to spread. But I'll see if anyone else has a better answer.
Yeah, well, so as I said, I think awareness is the biggest problem. When it comes to social media, we have journalists, we have academics, we have think tanks, we have politicians, everyone is kind of, focusing on disinformation being spread on social media, but that's not the case when it comes to gaming platforms. So that's vulnerability. The biggest vulnerability, and also we know that the actors we are dealing with, be it states or hostile bigger organizations, they are very, very creative at exploiting different means to reach people. So yeah, that's what I'm most worried about. And then to the question about if this is increasing or changing. We don't know enough to say that at the moment, because we're seeing more and more. But is it because we know where to look? We gain more knowledge, or if it's increasing? I have no idea. But also, I would like to say that if someone's interested in this subject, the Lund Psychological Defense Research Institute, it's called, has published a report where they identify 40 different methods of spreading information influence on gaming platforms with attached examples. So it's downloadable on our website. So please read that.
Great tips. Okay, any questions from the room? Yeah. Okay, first one here in front. We'll have someone coming with microphone. It's on. Okay.
Thank you so much. This is incredibly interesting. I'm wondering a bit, because we're talking a lot about what kind of disinformation and who are targeting these young people and where this kind of radicalization is being found. I'm more curious as to, and what I feel like we haven't talked about yet, but I'm sure we'll get into, is what are some of the things you do to kind of combat this? Because I understand you can do critical thinking education and media literacy training, but it seems within the gaming sphere, compared to like social media, which is like much more accessible and mainstream and it's easier to access, gaming a lot of the time can take place in like private servers and like, there's private Discord groups, and it's much more intimate in a way. What are some of the mechanisms you use to kind of combat this radicalization and the sort of spread of this information? Thank you.
Great question.
Thank you. Just
Robin?
maybe a couple of thoughts, and also in interest of time that we have more time for questions as well. Great point, and we of course have to be realistic. We heard how many people are gamers. We of course, we can't. First thing is we try to make our voices heard on different platforms. But of course, as you say, some of them can't be accessed. But at least we try to engage the gaming community as one, right? a couple of years before, like government agencies, government bodies, they didn't know about Twitch, right? But now NATO, for instance, we sometimes hosted Twitch events, right? And one thing here to increase reaches, we worked with content creators on the gaming platforms. Actually, I played Among Us with a gaming influencer, and Cuts on the Table, I've never played Among Us before. And I won one round, I just want to say. Anyhow, with the gaming influencer, The Royal Viking, that's his real name. So, I mean, just like trying to actually think, how can we make our voices heard, and maybe how can we engage community leaders as a first step, and then we try to work closer with you, all that we can broaden that scope.
I just want to, I agree, absolutely. But also,
You can also disagree.
no, not in this issue.
Okay.
Maybe other things. But we should also take this, I think it's something that a lot of adults should take seriously, first of all. Gaming is something that is usually dismissed, or something that if something happens online, it might not be taken as seriously, such as we've come a long way with social media, as you said, but not as long in the gaming aspect of this. So from a youth perspective, I think of course there are measurements that we can take, such as laws and other measurements as well. But I think it's important for adults also to be involved, so we can work in that sense as well, and ask your children, what are you doing online? Who are you playing with? Who are your friends online as well? I think these are important questions to ask, just as we ask these questions when they are in schoolyard, or who their friends are IRL, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think most things are already said, and you're right. I mean, the gaming world is different also from the social media world. It is much more fragmented, and I don't think the answer here would be to look in every dark corner of gaming. But I mean, awareness among players, gamers, awareness among game developers. I don't think anyone wants, antagonistic actors in gaming exploiting and spreading disinformation. So I really hope that we can, together with the gaming industry, avoid a 2016 type of moment that we had with the social media companies.
A related question that we got online is, several ways of fighting disinformation are based on self-management and self-responsibility, especially for social media platforms. In order to avoid direct censorship interventions by the government, is it really possible to fight disinformation on a global scale without censorship?
Yes.
I can only agree. Censorship is not something that we are very fond of. There are definitely other ways that we can tackle this.
Agree or disagree?
We're doing one sentences. Oh God, this is too much pressure. But yeah, of course, like we can't, prohibit people from speaking, but we can engage the platforms more to actually, tell them they know about the threat, but just to work closer with the companies as well.
I think we have time for one more question from the room. Goes to you here in front.
Thank you very much for this insightful discussion. I will refer a little bit to the first NATO's new strategic concept that, as a novelty, mentions China and China's opaque strategic agenda as a potential security challenge for our Euro-Atlantic security. And coupling this with the fact that we, of course, within our alliance still lack a common response. We see some countries that have decided to ban TikTok, for example, and some that have very complex interdependencies when it comes to their economies and their critical infrastructure with this global actor. And I would really want to hear your opinion regarding China's potentially being a security challenge when it comes to foreign information manipulation and different platforms that operate in our countries with very different ways of engaging audiences and very different ways of potentially being disinformation channels. Thank you.
Thanks for this very important question. Just the interest of time, this can be a a long conversation. We can, we're all around all day, so we can talk later as well. But just very briefly, first thing, you said it yourself, right? NATO recognizes China, and you all might have read our strategic concept. China is recognized as what you said. So thanks for pointing that out as well. So we take it seriously. We always try to, as an alliance, we focus on tracking the threat picture that is shaped by all kinds of different actors. So we're not interested only on one. So we want to pursue a 360 approach to actually understand what are the key actors that actually shaping, trying to leverage disinformation, hostile information to actually undermine the security of the alliance. So first thing, we do recognize it, and we've come a long way as well. If you think of how many countries as a NATO alliance come together to develop the strategic concept that mentions the competition that China causes here. But we'll talk more after this.
Great. And now our time is up, unfortunately, but great idea. Keep the discussion afterwards. Thank you very much for this thought-provoking talk. It certainly raised many interesting perspectives, both when it comes to challenges, but also I'm glad that we touched upon some good advice on effective message that democratic societies can take in order to strengthen resilience and tackle antagonistic influence on gaming platforms. Thanks to the audience online and here in the room, and thanks to the panel, and have a good afternoon.